The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of Willow Creek as cattle rancher Daniel Hayes guided his horse toward the town well. His throat was parched from 3 days of driving cattle across the desert, and his canteen had run dry miles back. What he didn't expect to find at the well would change his life forever. A small figure struggled with a heavy wooden bucket, his thin arms shaking as he tried to lift it from the well's depths. The boy couldn't have been more than 9 years old, his clothes nothing more than patched rags hanging loose on his skeletal frame. As Daniel watched, the bucket slipped from the child's weak grasp, tumbling back down the well with a splash that echoed in the stone depths. The boy's face crumpled in terror. "No, no, no," the child whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, not again." Before Daniel could announce his presence, heavy footsteps approached from behind the orphanage building. A large man in black emerged, his face twisted with rage. Brother Thomas, the orphanage supervisor, was known throughout Willow Creek for his harsh methods and cruel punishments. Michael O'Brien. Brother Thomas roared, "Did you drop that bucket again? You worthless little rat." The boy, Michael, cowered against the stone well. "I'm sorry, Brother Thomas. My hands, they're so tired. And the bucket was so heavy with water. I tried. I really tried." "Tried?" Brother Thomas grabbed Michael by the collar, lifting him off his feet. "Trying doesn't feed the other children. Trying doesn't clean the floors. You're nothing but a burden, boy." Daniel watched in horror as Brother Thomas raised his large hand and struck Michael across the face. The sound echoing off the surrounding buildings, the small boy crumpled to the ground, blood trickling from his split lip. "You'll get no supper tonight," Brother Thomas snarled, "and tomorrow you'll carry twice as many buckets until you learn not to be so clumsy. Maybe a few more beatings will teach you some responsibility." That's when Daniel stepped forward, his spurs jingling softly on the dusty ground. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm, but carrying the authority of a man who'd faced down rustlers and wild animals. "Is there a problem here?" Brother Thomas spun around, his face flushing with embarrassment at being caught in his cruelty. "This is none of your concern, stranger. This boy needs discipline to learn his place." Daniel knelt down beside Michael, noting the fresh bruises on the child's arms and the way he flinched at any sudden movement. "What's your name, son?" "Michael, sir," the boy whispered, his green eyes wide with fear and confusion at this stranger's gentle tone. "How long have you been carrying water buckets today, Michael?" "Since sunrise, sir. Brother Thomas says I have to fill the big barrel for washing and cooking. It takes 40 trips. Daniel's jaw tightened. 40 trips? For a child who looked like he hadn't had a decent meal in months. He stood slowly, fixing Brother Thomas with a steady stare. "That bucket holds about 3 gallons of water," Daniel said quietly. "For a boy his size, that's like asking him to carry half his body weight up from that well 40 times a day. The boy needs to earn his keep." Brother Thomas replied defensively, "These orphans don't get charity. They work for their food and shelter." Daniel looked around at the orphanage grounds, noting the other children peering fearfully from windows, all of them thin and hollow-eyed. His heart clenched as he recognized the signs of systematic neglect and abuse. "Michael," Daniel said gently, "would you mind if I helped you with this bucket?" The boy looked confused, glancing nervously at Brother Thomas. You want to help me?" "Sir, I'd be honored to help you, son." Daniel approached the well and easily pulled up the bucket, its weight nothing to his strong arms developed from years of ranch work. But instead of handing it to Michael, he lifted it to his shoulder and began walking toward the orphanage. "Where should this go, Michael?" The boy hurried to keep up with Daniel's long strides, his face bright with amazement. "The barrel by the kitchen, sir." "But you don't have to." "I want to," Daniel said firmly. A man should never stand by when a child needs help behind them. Brother Thomas sputtered with indignation. "You're interfering with the boy's chores. He needs to learn responsibility." Daniel poured the water into the large wooden barrel and turned to face Brother Thomas. "He's learning responsibility. He's also learning that some people in this world show kindness to those who need it." For the next hour, Daniel helped Michael carry bucket after bucket of water. With each trip, the boy grew more relaxed, even managing a shy smile when Daniel praised his hard work. Other children began to gather round, watching in wonder as this stranger treated Michael with respect and gentleness. "Why are you helping me?" Michael asked during one of their trips. "Nobody ever helps me." Daniel paused, remembering his own childhood, his own father's harsh treatment before he'd run away to make his own life on the frontier. "Because everyone deserves kindness, Michael. And because I can see you're a good boy trying his best in a difficult situation. Brother Thomas says I'm worthless, says I'll never amount to anything because I'm weak." Daniel knelt down to Michael's eye level. "Michael, listen to me carefully. You're not worthless. You're not weak. You're a child who's been asked to do a man's work without proper food or rest. That's not weakness, son. That's impossible." As they finished filling the barrel, Brother Thomas approached with a scowl. "The boy's work is done for today. You can go now." "Stranger." But Daniel wasn't finished. "Actually, I'd like to speak with whoever's in charge of this orphanage. I have some concerns about the conditions here." "I am in charge," Brother Thomas replied coldly, "and I don't appreciate outsiders questioning my methods." Daniel looked around at the other children, all of them watching with hope and fear warring in their young faces. "Then we definitely need to talk. But first, Michael needs food and medical attention for those injuries. The boy will eat when he earns it." "No," Daniel said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "The boy will eat now, and those cuts need cleaning before they get infected." Brother Thomas stepped closer, trying to intimidate Daniel with his size. "You have no authority here, cowboy. This is church property, and these children are my responsibility." Daniel didn't back down. "Then you're failing in that responsibility, and I'm going to make sure the territorial authorities know about it." The standoff continued for several tense moments before Daniel made his decision. "Michael, would you like to come have supper with me in town? I know a nice lady who runs the boarding house. She makes the best beef stew in 3 counties." Michael's eyes lit up with desperate hunger and hope, but he glanced fearfully at Brother Thomas. Am I allowed, sir?" "You most certainly are not," Brother Thomas snapped. "You belong here, and here you'll stay." Daniel placed a gentle hand on Michael's shoulder. "Son, would you like to come with me?" Michael looked up at this kind stranger who had carried his heavy burden without complaint, who had spoken to him with respect and gentleness. "Yes, sir, more than anything." "Then that's settled." Daniel turned to Brother Thomas. "I'll have him back tomorrow, after he's had a proper meal and a good night's sleep. You cannot simply take one of my charges." "I'm not taking him," Daniel replied calmly. "I'm giving him what every child deserves: food, kindness, and a chance to be treated like a human being instead of a beast of burden." As they walked away from the orphanage, Michael's small hand slipped into Daniel's larger one. "Are you really going to bring me back tomorrow?" Daniel looked down at the boy's upturned face, seeing hope and fear battling in those green eyes. "Michael, I'm going to make sure you never have to carry those heavy buckets alone again. That's a promise." Behind them, the other orphans watched from their windows as Michael walked away with the tall stranger, who had carried his burden and treated him like he mattered. For the first time in years, hope flickered in their hearts. To subscribe to our channel to see what happens next. Will Daniel find a way to permanently rescue Michael from his terrible situation? Don't miss the next chapter of this heartwarming tale of compassion and courage on the frontier. Daniel Hayes had seen plenty of injustice in his 42 years on the frontier, but nothing had prepared him for what he discovered during his night with young Michael O'Brien. As the boy devoured bowl after bowl of Martha's famous beef stew at the boarding house, the full extent of his suffering became clear. Michael's thin frame was covered with bruises in various stages of healing. His hands were raw and blistered from rope burns where he'd struggled with the heavy bucket. Most heartbreaking of all were the stories that tumbled out between mouthfuls of food. Tales of children forced to work from dawn to dusk, beaten for the smallest mistakes, and systematically starved to keep them weak and compliant. "There are 12 of us," Michael said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "The youngest is only 6. Little Sarah, she cries all the time because she's so hungry. Brother Thomas says crying is a sin, so he locks her in the root cellar when she won't stop." Daniel's hands clenched into fists under the table. Martha, the boarding house owner, had gone pale as she listened to Michael's revelations. Her own Maternal instincts were screaming at the injustice of it all. What about the church authorities? Daniel asked. Surely they don't know what's happening. Michael shook his head. Brother Thomas tells them we're all wicked children who need harsh correction. He says if we complain, it proves we're evil and need more punishment. The visiting ministers believe him because we're just orphans. Nobody cares what happens to orphans. That night, as Michael slept peacefully in a real bed for the first time in months, Daniel sat on the boarding house porch planning his next move. He couldn't just return the boy to that hellhole and walk away. But he also couldn't simply kidnap 12 children. No matter how noble his intentions, the solution came to him. As he watched the sun rise over the desert landscape, if the church authorities didn't know what was happening, then it was time they learned the truth. But first, he needed evidence, and he needed allies. The next morning, Daniel took Michael to the general store and bought him new clothes, proper boots, and a hat that actually fit his small head. The transformation was remarkable. Clean, fed, and properly dressed, Michael looked like any other frontier boy instead of the half-starved waif he'd been just 24 hours earlier. Now, Michael, Daniel said as they approached the orphanage, I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that? Yes, sir, Michael replied, though Daniel could see the fear creeping back into his eyes as the familiar building came into view. I'm not abandoning you, Daniel assured him, but I need to gather evidence of what's happening here. And I need witnesses. Can you help me with that? Michael nodded solemnly. What do you want me to do? Just be yourself. Show the other children that someone cares about them. And if Brother Thomas tries to hurt you or any of the others while I'm watching, don't be afraid. I won't let him. They found Brother Thomas in the courtyard, berating a small girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She was struggling with a heavy basket of wet laundry, tears streaming down her dirty face. Move faster. You lazy child, Brother Thomas shouted. The Lord despises sloth. Daniel stepped forward. Good morning, Brother Thomas. I've brought Michael back as promised, and I've brought something else. He handed Brother Thomas an official-looking document. That's a letter from the territorial governor's office. They're conducting an investigation into reports of child abuse at frontier orphanages. They'll be sending inspectors within the week. It was a complete bluff, but Brother Thomas didn't know that. His face went white as he read the forged letterhead that Daniel had paid the hotel clerk to create. This is outrageous, Brother Thomas sputtered. These children are well cared for. They're simply learning the value of hard work and Christian discipline. Then you won't mind the inspection, Daniel replied calmly. In the meantime, I'll be staying in town for a few days, checking on the children, making sure they're safe over the next 3 days. Daniel made himself a constant presence around the orphanage. He arrived each morning to help with the water buckets, bringing fresh bread and fruit for the children. He stayed late into the evening, teaching the older boys basic ranch skills and telling stories that made them laugh for the first time in months. Most importantly, he gained their trust. One by one, the children began to open up about their treatment. He learned about the systematic starvation, the brutal beatings, the psychological torture designed to break their spirits. He also learned about the children who had disappeared over the years, supposedly sent to other institutions, but never heard from again. Daniel documented everything in a detailed journal, including sketches of the children's injuries and direct quotes of their testimonies. But he knew that written evidence alone wouldn't be enough. He needed official witnesses, people whose word would carry weight with the authorities. On the 4th day, his patience paid off. Brother Thomas, frustrated by Daniel's constant presence and interference, finally lost his temper in front of the wrong audience. Daniel had arranged for Dr. Matthews, the town physician, and Reverend Wilson, the Methodist minister, to visit the orphanage under the pretense of a routine health inspection. What they witnessed would haunt them for the rest of their lives. It started when 8-year-old Tommy accidentally spilled a bucket of scrub water while cleaning the floor. Brother Thomas erupted in rage, grabbing the child by the hair and lifting him off his feet. Worthless little animal, he roared, striking Tommy across the face with his open palm. Maybe a few lashes will teach you to be more careful. Dr. Matthews stepped forward immediately. Stop, you're hurting that child. But brother, Thomas was beyond reason. He threw Tommy to the ground and began removing his thick leather belt. These children need discipline. They need to learn their place. That's when Daniel acted. He stepped between Brother Thomas and the cowering child, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Brother Thomas, I think you've done enough. Get out of my way, cowboy. This is church business. This is child abuse," Daniel replied quietly. "And it ends now." The confrontation that followed was swift and decisive. Brother Thomas, emboldened by years of unchecked cruelty, took a swing at Daniel. The rancher easily caught the larger man's fist and twisted his arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees. "Reverend Wilson," Daniel said calmly, still restraining. "Brother Thomas, I think you've seen enough to make your report to the church authorities." Reverend Wilson, his face pale with shock and disgust, nodded grimly. "More than enough. Dr. Matthews, we need to examine all these children immediately." The medical examination that followed revealed the full scope of the horror. Every child showed signs of malnutrition and abuse. Several had poorly healed broken bones. All of them carried the psychological scars of systematic torture. As Brother Thomas was led away in shackles by the territorial marshal, the children gathered around Daniel with a mixture of hope and fear. They had been conditioned to expect disappointment, to believe that any relief would be temporary. "What happens to us now?" Michael asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. Daniel knelt down to their level, looking each child in the eye. "Now you get to be children again. You get proper food, clean clothes, education, and most importantly, you get to be treated with kindness and respect. But where will we go?" Little Sarah whispered. "Nobody wants orphans like us." Daniel smiled, his heart full of certainty about his next words. "Well, Sarah, I happen to know a rancher who has a big house, plenty of food, and room for 12 children who need a home. If you'll have him." That is, the explosion of joy that followed was unlike anything Daniel had ever experienced. 12 children, who had known nothing but cruelty and neglect, suddenly found themselves embraced by love and acceptance as they crowded around him. Chattering excitedly about their new life, Daniel felt a warmth in his chest that he'd never known before. Michael, the boy who had started it all by struggling with a heavy bucket, looked up at Daniel with tears of joy streaming down his face. "Are you really going to be our father?" Daniel pulled the boy into a tight hug. "Michael, I'm going to try my best to be the father you all deserve, and I promise you this. No child in my house will ever carry a burden too heavy for their shoulders." That evening, as they prepared for the journey to the ranch, Martha from the boarding house approached Daniel with tears in her eyes. "What you're doing, Daniel Hayes, it's the most Christian thing I've ever seen." Daniel looked at the 12 children gathered around the wagon, their faces bright with hope for the first time in their young lives. "Martha, these children taught me something important. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in how much weight you can carry alone. Sometimes it's in knowing when to share the load." Subscribe to our channel to see the final chapter of this incredible journey. How will Daniel manage 12 traumatized children on his ranch? Will they all find healing and happiness together? Don't miss the heartwarming conclusion to this tale of redemption and family. 6 months had passed since Daniel Hayes loaded 12 frightened orphans into his wagon and brought them home to the Circle H Ranch. What followed was a transformation that amazed everyone who witnessed it, including Daniel himself. The children, who had once cowered in fear, now ran freely across the ranch property, their laughter echoing off the mountains that surrounded their new home. Michael, the boy who had struggled with heavy water buckets, had grown strong and confident under Daniel's patient guidance. He was now teaching the younger children to ride and helping with the easier ranch chores. But the road to healing hadn't been smooth. Little Sarah still woke up screaming from nightmares about being locked in dark cellars. 10-year-old James flinched whenever anyone raised their voice, even in excitement. And Tommy, the boy who had been beaten for spilling water, hoarded food under his bed despite Daniel's constant reassurance that there would always be plenty to eat. Daniel learned patience he never knew he possessed. With the help of Dr. Matthews and a kind woman named Elena Vasquez, whom he'd hired as a housekeeper and mother figure, He created an environment of safety and unconditional love that slowly began to heal the children's wounded hearts. The real test came on a sweltering summer day when the well pump broke down. Daniel was in the far pasture checking on the cattle when young Billy came racing toward him on horseback, his face flushed with panic. "Daniel, Daniel, the pump's broken and we need water for the horses. And Michael says he can carry buckets from the creek, but Elena says no. And Sarah's crying because she's thirsty." Daniel's heart clenched as he rode hard toward the ranch house. The sight that greeted him was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Michael stood at the edge of Willow Creek, which ran behind the house, holding a bucket and looking determined but terrified. The memories of his brutal treatment at the orphanage were clearly flooding back, but he was willing to face those fears to help his new family. "I can do it," Michael said as Daniel approached. "I'm stronger now. I can carry water for everyone." Daniel dismounted and knelt beside the boy who had become like a son to him. "Michael, you don't have to carry those buckets. Remember what I promised you, that no child in your house would carry a burden too heavy for their shoulders." Michael recited the words that had become a family motto. "That's right, son, but there's something else I want you to understand." Daniel picked up the bucket and easily filled it from the creek. "This isn't about whether you're strong enough now to carry it. It's about understanding that you never have to carry any burden alone." He lifted the bucket and began walking toward the house, with Michael hurrying to keep up. "But Daniel, there's so much work to do. The animals need water, and the garden, and cooking. And we'll get it all done," Daniel assured him. Together, what followed was one of the most beautiful sights anyone at the Circle H Ranch had ever seen. Daniel organized the children into a water brigade, with the older ones helping the younger ones carry smaller containers. Elena brought out tin cups and mason jars, anything that could hold water. Even 6-year-old Sarah insisted on helping, carefully carrying a small pitcher that was just the right size for her tiny hands. As they worked together, Daniel noticed something wonderful happening. The children weren't just carrying water, they were carrying each other's fears. Tommy, who had been beaten for spilling water, laughed when little Mary accidentally soaked herself trying to help. James, who usually stayed silent and withdrawn, began singing a work song that had all the children giggling. Most importantly, Michael began to smile as he realized that this kind of work, shared among people who cared about each other, was completely different from the forced labor and abuse he had endured. "This is fun," Sarah announced, her face dripping with creek water and her dress soaked. "It's like a game, the best game," agreed Michael, and Daniel saw that the boy truly meant it. By evening, they had enough water stored to last until Daniel could fix the pump the next day. As they sat around the dinner table, sharing Elena's delicious chicken and dumplings, Daniel reflected on how much his life had changed. Before the children came, the Circle H had been successful but lonely. Now it was alive with energy, purpose, and love. The ranch hands, initially skeptical about having so many children around, had become protective older brothers to the young ones. Cookie, the camp cook, made special treats just to see the children's faces light up. "Daniel," Michael said as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the stars come out over the desert, "I've been thinking about what you said today, about not carrying burdens alone." "What about it, son?" "Well, before you came, I thought being strong meant doing everything by myself, even if it hurt. Brother Thomas always said asking for help was weakness." Daniel nodded, remembering his own struggles with pride and self-reliance before he learned the value of community and family. "What do you think now?" Michael was quiet for a moment, watching his siblings playing in the yard. Sarah was teaching the younger boys a clapping game, her nightmares temporarily forgotten. James was showing Tommy how to whittle a small horse from a piece of wood, his voice patient and kind. "I think being strong means knowing when to ask for help," Michael said. "Finally, and being willing to help others carry their burdens too." "That's exactly right, son. And you know what else?" "What?" "You're one of the strongest people I know, not because you can carry heavy buckets, but because you chose to hope. When hope seemed impossible, you chose to trust when trust was dangerous. You chose to love when love had only brought you pain." Michael leaned against Daniel's shoulder, a gesture that still amazed the rancher with its simple trust. Do you think the other children, the ones still in places like we were, do you think they'll find families too? Daniel's throat tightened with emotion. I hope so, Michael, and you know what? Maybe when you're older, you can help make sure they do. Maybe you can be the kind of man who stops when he sees a child struggling with a burden too bare-eyed. Like that, Michael said softly, I'd like to help other kids the way you helped us a year later. The Circle H Ranch hosted its first annual summer picnic for the surrounding communities. Children from 3 counties came to swim in the creek, play games, and enjoy Elena's famous barbacoa. But the most popular attraction was Michael O'Brien, now 13 and confident, teaching younger children how to rope and ride. Daniel watched from the porch as his son patiently showed a shy little girl how to approach a gentle mare. The girl reminded him of Sarah when she first arrived, frightened and withdrawn. But under Michael's patient guidance, she was soon giggling as the horse nuzzled her palm looking for treats. You did good, Daniel Hayes, Elena said, joining him on the porch with a cup of coffee. Look at them all. All 12 of his children were scattered around the property, each one healthy, happy, and secure in the knowledge that they were loved. Sarah was leading a group of toddlers in a singing game. Tommy was helping Cookie serve lemonade, his face bright with pride at being trusted with the important task. James, once so silent and fearful, was entertaining a group of visitors with stories of ranch life. We all did good, Daniel corrected. Every single person on this ranch, every friend who helped, every person who chose kindness over cruelty. We all carried this burden together. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Daniel felt a deep satisfaction he had never known in his bachelor days. The Circle H Ranch had become more than a cattle operation. It had become a beacon of hope, a place where broken children learned to heal and love again. Michael approached the porch as the last visitors were leaving, his face flushed with happiness and exhaustion. Daniel, Mrs. Peterson from town asked if we could take in her nephew. His parents died in that cholera outbreak, and he's got nowhere to go. Daniel smiled, knowing that his answer would be the same as it always was when a child needed help. How old is he? 8, I think. And Daniel, he's been carrying water buckets at the hotel. The owner's been beating him when he spills any. Daniel's expression hardened, the old protective fire flaring in his eyes. Well then, I think it's time someone taught that boy that he doesn't have to carry those buckets alone. Can I come with you when you go get him? Michael asked eagerly. I wouldn't have it any other way. Son, after all, you understand better than anyone what it means to have someone share your burden. As father and son sat together on the porch, planning another rescue, another chance to show a hurting child that the world could be kind, Daniel reflected on the simple truth that had changed all their lives. Sometimes the greatest act of strength wasn't in carrying a heavy load, but in setting it down and asking others to help. And sometimes the greatest gift you could give another person was to carry their burden until they were strong enough to carry it themselves. The boy who had once struggled alone with water buckets too heavy for his small hands was now a young man ready to help others with their impossible loads. And the rancher who had stopped to help one suffering child had discovered that a shared burden wasn't a burden at all, but a blessing that multiplied with every act of kindness. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of hope and redemption from the American frontier. This tale of Michael and Daniel shows us that families are built not just through blood, but through choosing to carry each other's burdens with love and compassion. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join us for more emotional journeys that prove the enduring power of human kindness and the strength we find when we face life's challenges together. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that they never have to carry their burdens alone.